Well, joining me now to talk more about infrastructure development in Asia and specifically the AIIB is Dan McClory. He's Managing Director and Head of China for Bastard Securities. Welcome, Dan.
Thanks, Rachelle. Great to be on your show.
So for people who aren't familiar, what is it that the AIIB brings to the table as a multilateral bank that others don't?
The ability to focus on infrastructure. Infrastructure has particular demands. So whether it's roads and bridges, it's different from many other forms of investment. So having a longer-term perspective, having the investment capital to commit, and having partners like the AIIB has put together is extremely important.
Now, we know that this year's theme for the AIIB meeting is mobilizing finance for infrastructure, innovation, and collaboration. Why do you think this is a priority right now?
It's what the world needs. It's certainly what the world needs in the developing parts where the initial investment is going to. We're talking about countries like India, Pakistan. These are very, very important projects for that part of the world. And innovation, but also in a sustainable way. So alternative energy, clean cities, smart cities. These are all themes that you're going to see through AIIB. And they're very important ones.
So in terms of the biggest achievements, since this was first conceived 3 years ago, since its launch, what would you say have been the really big markers of achievement here?
There's at least three. So the first is, and this is no small feat, there's $100 billion of capital that's been put together. Okay, so there's 20 billion of subscriptions, there's 80 billion that's callable from the members of the AIIB. The second metric I'd say is going from 57 founding members to 86 today. And virtually by exception, there are only two notable ones who aren't members, which of course would be the US because of the affiliation with the World Bank, right, and Japan with the Asian Development Bank. So those are two really important ones. And then I think it's the capital that's been deployed, about $4.5 billion so far. And on the heels of the meeting in India, another $2 billion is going to go out to Indian projects. So it's going to get up to somewhere around $6.5 billion.
Now, this certainly adds to the good news that we saw from these high credit ratings that we saw from all three of the biggest rating agencies, Moody's, Fitch, and of course, Standard & Poor's. What is it that the AIIB is doing to really get those ratings?
Well, number one, it's got high-quality countries who are constituents. I mean, we're talking about China. We're talking about South Korea. We're talking about Canada now being admitted. So that's number one. But number two, this is really important for the growth of the AIIB. It's not going to happen just with the capital of these nations. It's going to come from pension funds. It's going to come from insurance companies. It's going to come from bond sales. So having a AAA credit rating will allow the AIIB to access additional capital at an extremely low cost.
And we know that the AIIB's president, Jin Liqun, he really highlighted the value of getting more private sector investment in this space. How do you think the bank should be going about getting that private capital?
Well, you've got to align investors with the outcome. And the outcome for infrastructure projects is typically stability, predictable cash flows, and a relatively long build-out period. So you're not going to find equity investors that are interested in IPOs in the stock market. You're going to find insurance companies, pension funds, and others that want that consistency, and they want the quality level of projects that the AIIB will bring.
And in terms of any problems or challenges that you foresee as the AIIB continues to expand and invest in more projects, what should we be keeping an eye on?
I think the biggest one was the lack of inclusion, and these countries opted out, by the US and Japan. But ironically, the World Bank and the Asian Development Bank have both participated in fundings with the AIIB. So they've actually co-invested together. So even though the two principal nations that are behind those other institutions have not yet opted into the AIIB, they have indirectly by co-funding projects together. So I would have thought that that would have been a major concern or a risk factor, but it's turning out not to be.
Certainly an interesting connection there. Always good to have you on. Dan McClory there, Managing Director and Head of China for Bastard Securities.